from the wedding and the honeymoon and all that crazy stuff. I think it'd be fun to make a video about the kind of lead up to the wedding, and then kind of like some of my thoughts and reflections in the aftermath, because I'm just thinking a lot. And it's definitely interesting to kind of compare the before and after, because obviously I've never gotten married before, and it's such like a big, huge thing, not just because of the amount of time and energy put into like planning it, but also because it's kind of like the marker of a big shift in life and, I don't know, taxes. So I think that's what today's video is going to be about. So technically we're going to be like jumping back and forth in time. This is the intro. So hi, my name's Mackenzie. This is my channel Think Too Much. In case it wasn't clear, I just got married. A lot of jumbled, confused thoughts. Something I have complained about ad nauseum throughout this process is kind of the instinct for people to be, or for this sentiment around this wedding to be like, oh, but it's your day, it's whatever you want, like don't let anyone, don't do this, don't do that. And it's like, but like specifically like don't let other people take it away from you, or just like, it's just like your day and it's all about what you want and whatever. And I think that is a lot of pressure at this time in life when I'm still like navigating how to even know what I want. It's been like an active project. I've made several videos talking about this, and it's kind of part of the quarter life journey and like the process. So I think having this like event that is such a huge kind of day in our lives, and like have that be the kind of sentiment around it, it just makes it all the more overwhelming. And like I already have some discomfort around being the center of attention and like demanding things of people, and like I'm still kind of unlearning people-pleasing tendencies. So the idea that like this wedding would be an inconvenience to people or like a burden or a nuisance, I think is something that kind of quietly weighs on my mind. And I think it leads to a lot of sensitivity. So when people kind of don't show up in the way that like you figure people show up, it's hard not to be like, does this mean something? Like, should I take this personally? And then where the second guessing comes in is like, if I take it personally, am I being like a brat, you know? Am I just being like overly selfish and like assuming people should just, you know, pause their life for me? It's really weird. You know? And even like talking about this, it's just like, I feel like such an asshole complaining most of the time, because it's like, even though, you know, I don't love planning a wedding, it's not my favorite activity, and I know a lot of people share in that feeling. You know, people are really kind of inconveniencing themselves and either contributing like money or other forms of help, their time, etc., to help with this event. So it's like any complaint feels like a betrayal to that somehow, or like complaining kind of equates taking that for granted. And while I know kind of logically that that's not the case, that like I can kind of carry both this like frustration and like the kind of emotional struggles I'm having with this event, or just like with planning this event specifically, it's like I can carry that alongside my appreciation for the people who have been either just like very go with the flow and like willing to kind of roll with the punches and like not making their inconvenience like known to us. Like I really appreciate that. And then the people who are like helping, it's like even more appreciation. Like it is very cool, and it is like very nice to kind of see people do that. But then I just feel guilty because it's like hard not to harp on the instances where like that's not what's happening. You know, someone is kind of voicing how the thing is inconveniencing them, or someone is like making kind of additional requests of us at this time that is just like super busy, and it's very disorienting. So I guess a core belief I want to have about myself, and one most of the time I do, is that like I am a good person, but I think I struggle sometimes with worrying that I'm like being selfish or vain or overly pessimistic. And I don't know, just as expectations are inevitable, it's also inevitable that like expectations won't be met in some instances. So I don't know, can I accept the fact that I have expectations and also accept the fact that like I am just gonna have to mourn some of them not being met, and like that's okay. That's just like life, and that is kind of what comes with these big events. And for every expectation not like unmet, there might be like something great that happened that I never even considered. But anyway, I think I've been talking for like 20 minutes, so I'm gonna go for a walk before my lunch break is over because I haven't been outside today. I think it actually is kind of nice to have like a reprieve at home. I think it just felt more intense. And then I got to New York and I was feeling like silly about how much emotion I was feeling and how much emotion I was expressing, and embarrassed and cringe. I made this tempeh burrito for dinner. It's like a vegan tempeh burrito with like beans, a little bit of like cashew cheesy cream sauce, lettuce with some like homemade pico de gallo. It is so good. Oh my god. Having a little TV dinner. The apartment's like mostly fine. We did like a good clean before we left, which I'm really glad that we did, and made this week, I feel like, a little bit more refreshing and like relaxing than it otherwise would have been. But right now it's a little bit messy, and I have said this before, I will continue to say it. Whenever my surroundings, my like room, my apartment is like messy, it means I'm like overwhelmed, which I am. I'm going to start reading. I've been craving reading, but I just like weirdly haven't had as much of an opportunity to do it lately, either because I'm wasting my own time by watching YouTube videos or like last night I had plans and then I've been like talking on the phone with Max at night, and otherwise just having a hard time sleeping. Hello. So Max and I got back from our honeymoon about a week ago this evening. I think in like a couple of hours it will officially be a week back. I think we like somewhat tried to ease ourselves back into kind of normal life. I feel like I was like in a little bit of like, I don't know what I was feeling, but I wasn't feeling like overwhelmingly positive. I mean, I think I was like a little bit overwhelmed being back and like trying to get back to like normal life just felt like a really big hurdle to overcome, or it was just like we just spent so many months of our life devoting our time and energy towards this like huge event. So there was just kind of some like kind of weirdness in the wake of that I was feeling. I think Max was feeling it too. And then on Sunday we went to the Natural History Museum, and I think just like a combination of that and just kind of like climbing our way back to normalcy like put me in like a great mood. I was just like, ah, wow. Like, love this city, love this museum. And it was pouring rain, so it's really a testament to the museum and the Upper West Side that even in the pouring rain, I'm like, no, this was really cool, and I'm glad we did it. To kind of get back to life, and I think part of the pleasure of it was just kind of the knowledge that like we could do this thing and it didn't feel like it was like a hindrance to all these other things that we needed to be doing, because I feel like that was kind of a little bit of like the rub of wedding planning. There was just kind of this constant like pressure and like mental drain of like, oh, but we got to do that thing for the wedding. So I feel like it made it a little bit harder to kind of be fully in anything that we were doing that like wasn't for the wedding. I just had this like experience yesterday where halfway through the day I was like, wow, I'm really looking forward to making our sweet potato tacos tonight. And I did, and it was so good. I was just like so happy to be like kind of back to this thing that we like always do. Like we make sweet potato tacos like all the time. Yeah, Monday I was just kind of like starting to feel the upswing of like my normal diet, my normal routine. It was like, oh, so glad to have this back. Anyway, I did want to kind of talk about like reflections and stuff from the wedding. One of the things I kind of noted after the wedding, or one of the kind of like philosophical shifts I had about like weddings, the wedding planning process, etc., was kind of about kind of what the day was about. Because I don't think until I experienced like the day itself, it was like just not, it didn't feel like fully kind of fair to say that like the wedding was all about me and Max, because like that's a common refrain that people have. I was really frustrated with that, like kind of throughout the wedding planning process, and like to no fault of anyone who said that. Like that's the nice thing to say, but I think it came with a lot of pressure, and it came with kind of like almost like the subtle erasure of like all of the work we were doing to accommodate our like friends and family for this event, in thanks for them like coming to celebrate with us. And so like, I mean, it shifted slightly in that I think I felt like the day would be more of like a communal experience, if that makes sense, or just kind of like a communal celebration. And it was, but it was just like hyper focused on me and Max, which is like dumb because it's so obvious in hindsight. And like, maybe I'm the only one in the world who experiences this, but I was like almost kind of shocked by the experience of like, oh, this day is just kind of people like, once it's planned, it's just kind of like the experience of like, I guess kind of putting on a show for people. So in that way, it wasn't fully about us, but it kind of was, because it's like trying to demonstrate our love to people. So it was still about us, but it was for others. But then all of the other elements of the day were just people like showering us with like praise, gifts, money, and it's kind of one of the reasons why like my anxious brain tried so hard to come up with like every possible way in which like something would go awry and it would make it impossible for it to be like the best day ever. I wish someone would have told me that like it's the best day ever, because it's literally just a day where like once it's all planned, you just show up, you go where people tell you to go, you do the things that you like practice again and again to do, and then people are just kind of like showering you with praise, and like you're surrounded by all of your favorite people, and you're able to kind of like reconnect with people who you haven't seen in a while because it's like a big event, so they came in from out of town, and it's just like a ton of fun. And it's you know, if you really think about it, it's almost impossible for it not to be, because you're essentially gathering all of your favorite people in a single space, and they're there to celebrate you and tell you how wonderful you are and tell you how excited they are for your relationship. So, you know, assuming that you have people in your life that kind of offer you that support, it's gonna be pretty difficult for that day not to be like pretty fucking fantastic. And I guess I just like wish someone would have, I think if I could go back in time, that's how I would put it to my past self, where it's like, it would be so hard. You'd have to work so hard to make this day not like one of the best ever, because it's literally just people being excited for you. Like once you plan it, yeah, the planning part sucks, but once you plan it, it's just praise and love and happiness and dancing and like, you know, all the kind of fruits of your labor. So that was good to know. But what I will say is that like the planning process, I think the day itself is clearly all about like the bride and groom, but the event and like the planning of the event is not all about the bride and groom. It can't be, because it's like, as the bride and groom, it's like you kind of are following certain rituals. So in some ways it's about kind of like cultural scripts. And then, you know, every other component of it is like trying to meet the needs of your guests. Like if it were all about me, then like, you know, we wouldn't have fed people during the cocktail hour because like I didn't participate in the cocktail hour. But obviously we wanted to because there was going to be drinks during the cocktail hour. And if there are drinks, then people probably want food, or maybe they're hungry because they've been there for a couple hours, blah, 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 blah. There were just like kind of a lot of instances like during the planning process that people would be like, no, but it's all about you. And it's like, I think if I could go back, I don't know. I don't think I would do anything differently, and I don't think I would try to tell myself anything different because something tells me that like my anxious brain would have figured out a way to like do anxiety regardless. But in hindsight, it's like the planning is not all about the bride and groom. The day is all about the bride and groom. But like the bride and groom do have to spend a ton of time thinking about everyone else's experience when they're essentially like curating and creating a like day of events for all of these people to participate in. And like that kind of comes through, I think, the most in the planning process when you kind of try to cater to these people's needs and like make everyone comfortable, kind of curate like a beautiful space for everyone to experience the event in. That's when it's kind of clear that it's like, no, but it's about everyone else too, because we need to kind of like offer thanks in some way that everyone kind of made this effort to be here. And like, what better way than to feed them and to shelter them and provide transport and just whatever else. So hello. So I just got off a call with my life coach because I do coaching instead of therapy. So we were talking a lot about the wedding, and I was kind of like emotionally processing more of my kind of thoughts and feelings about the wedding. But this time I was doing it with like a mental health professional. So I have additional thoughts and feelings. I think it's like specifically around disappointment with wedding stuff. I think there are definitely some kind of components of the wedding weekend that I do feel disappointed with, and that's something that's felt like so dirty throughout this kind of process, is like the possibility of feeling like disappointment, which is kind of silly because I, as an individual, have very high standards. So the idea that I wouldn't be disappointed by anything is silly. And maybe that's like not kind of like how I was thinking about it, but like, again, like disappointment just feels like a very dirty word. And like, I don't know, so we were talking a little bit about that and like kind of the guilt around like feeling like sad or frustrated about like how some things went down. And like, I think I mentioned in previous clips that there was something about like the wedding day that like luckily like I feel like just like a calm washed over me, which just made it so I could really like be in the day. But I do think that like that was a little bit of a product of kind of like learning from the night before, which was our rehearsal dinner and our welcome reception. And like there were just some expectations I had and some hopes I had for the dinner and the welcome reception that like were just not quite met. I just think that like I was really in my head throughout the whole kind of rehearsal dinner welcome reception process, and I think it was super understandable given like the various things that went wrong. But I think as a result and kind of as like a learning, it was almost like it kind of like allowed me on the wedding day to just kind of check in with myself and like recognize you were responsible for making sure like you have the kind of night that you want. And I didn't even know what that meant for the rehearsal dinner. I'll try to put it into words, but basically that like something I clocked through during the wedding, which was really interesting, and I totally credit our rabbi for, because like before the ceremony there was like a few kind of pre-ceremony traditions, like Jewish traditions that we did, and at some point she was just like, okay, you two, like there's a lot going on right now, it's crazy, and like this is a big day, but like don't lose sight of what we're here for. Like you're about to do the ceremony, this is about you two, and just like really kind of saying like helpful and kind of inspiring things to just like get us out of our heads and like into our bodies to experience the moment like as it was, And I'm so grateful for that. If I were to offer advice, it's like we really benefited from having an officiant that we had a prior kind of history with. And we really benefited from like having someone, like I just kind of lucked out because she was the person who did my, who helped like teach the courses for my Jewish conversion. So I already kind of had like a relationship with her. But I guess I would just kind of encourage you to like have someone in your life that is a little bit more like kind of spiritual and like kind of has that attitude and like kind of believes in the kind of power of like being mindful and that sort of thing. Just having someone like that who really cares about you on the day of to just kind of remind you to like get out of your head and like to kind of refocus your like priorities and your perspective for the day. Because I swear to God, like I was already having like a great time up until that point. I didn't even think I was having fun. It was like, oh, we're just doing the thing. I didn't realize how much I was like in my head still until that moment. And then it was just like immediately like in my body, I could like feel all of the feelings that like one feels like during their wedding. It was like funny because right before I was like, I can't imagine crying during the ceremony. I'm like, so I just don't feel like in tune with that. And then she like gave us that little spiel. And then she like also like read us like a nice poem to kind of like get us like whatever in the moment. It sounds funny, but whatever. And just like immediately started crying. I was like, oh, I didn't realize how like out of touch with my emotions I was until you started doing this. But definitely have someone like in your corner that's able to do that. And this is what I was thinking about too, like after the fact. So like women are like like the primary planners of like weddings, right? And that was not true in this case. Like Max was very helpful throughout the entire process. But I was just kind of like laughing at the phenomenon of like women being the primary planners of like weddings. And then also like women in a lot of way, like weirdly being like the focus of weddings, which is unfortunate. I feel like it should be the couple, but like in a lot of ways it is just kind of the women. But anyway, and it's just kind of ironic because I feel like women are like socialized as like perfectionists. So I feel like there's like a lot of women who kind of relate to the experience of like not liking doing things that they're like not good at. So pretty much anything that's new. So it's like this entirely like new, otherwise like completely never experienced before thing is like primarily like on the shoulders of women. It's like kind of funny. It's just like, oh yeah, do this thing for the first time ever and like try not to feel any disappointment in yourself or like the outcome, because we know how well you handle like being new to things and like not knowing how to do it exactly the way you want to do it. There's something, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I was like thinking about that and I was like, that's kind of funny. And then I was also kind of thinking about how I kind of wonder if like disappointment is a little bit of like a dirty word because people just kind of avoid engaging in like talk about the things that went wrong during their wedding. Like this is a little bit conspiratorial, I guess. But I'm like, I feel a little bit like people don't feel comfortable or like feel it's like kind of necessary to talk about like all the things that go wrong with weddings. So there is just kind of this culture around it that it's like this idea that it's like supposed to be kind of like perfect and great. You know, if I'm extending this logic to myself as someone who is like kind of an anxious person, like I have friends who like I can like look at circumstances that they go through and it's like objectively like negative things are happening and they will like kind of still spin it to be like the more positive thing. And like I don't necessarily like look at that with judgment. I don't look at it with like self-judgment either. It just kind of like is. And I think I can kind of objectively like kind of look at myself and be like, no, I tend to be a little bit more sober about like the things that like were negative and that I like don't like or whatever. And I try to be comfortable kind of engaging in that and then like feeling the negative feelings that like arise with that rather than just like avoiding it. And like maybe like the positive spin works for them, but it doesn't work for me. It just makes me feel like an asshole. Like it's like if I try to be positive about this, but I don't feel positive about it, like it would be inauthentic to me. So I don't know, I was just kind of thinking about that in terms of like weddings, where it's like, oh, but maybe weddings are kind of the same way, that it's like the reason disappointment feels like a dirty word is either because like other people feel like it's a dirty word and they don't want to engage with like the things that were let down, even though like letdowns are inevitable for like an entire weekend of an event that you've never planned before. It's crazy how emotionally overwhelming a wedding is and like how hard it can be to like kind of parse through like the thoughts and feelings in the aftermath. I mean, that could be it too. Who knows? Like maybe in like 10 years, I'll have just blacked all of this out. And so people just kind of like forget about like all the minutia that like bothered them at the time because it's silly little stuff. It's definitely been a process, kind of learning to process negative emotions surrounding something like this, which is kind of like very once in a lifetime coded. It can be like a little overwhelming. So I guess if you just got married and you're there, you're not alone. And if you're about to get married and you experience it after the fact, you're not alone. You're normal, if you consider me normal, which you don't have to. And then if you just got married and you didn't experience any of this, good for you. Okay, I'm gonna go work out.